Meanwhile, in Trench 1 over the defences, things are going well.
What's that then?
Along the side.
Oh, you're talking about these wonderful sods here?
I certainly am.
Yeah, they look
It looks like we're finding the layers of individual turfs cut by the Roman soldiers to build the rampart around 2,000 years ago.
And the brown stuff on top of them is the decayed organics, isn't it, of the sort of grass side down, side down turf, like that.
And the great thing is we've also got this ditch down here where Phil's digging. Looks like there's a ditch that's contemporary with this rampart. Yeah, it's really nice.
While in this test pit, what I was calling Trench 2, I'm lending a hand and learning that timber structures leave fairly subtle evidence. I've got something here, something black, which looks to me either like a fireplace or a post hole, I don't know.
Well, charcoal at least. It'll need cleaning up a bit more to see the edges, won't it?
I thought I'd cleaned it up. Could this be packing around it?
It could be, or Gordon was saying it might be to support timbers for buildings. Remember I said to you earlier that if you put timber buildings up, you don't see much trace on the surface when they've rotted. But, you know, if you've got to level them up with stones and stuff, and it's those stones that we get in lines like that, isn't it? Yeah.
How much cleaner have I got to get this thing?
Well, as clean as you can, really. You don't want any of that loose stuff lying about, you know.
Well, that's just my little pile.
Well, you shouldn't leave little piles, really, like that.
Sorry. Having a go, you've only just arrived.
I've gone through the stage of doing the digging like that. I'm like the surgeon who's dropped the doctor bit, you see.
But there's no doubt about it, today's biggest success has been the geophys survey of this field. It's revealed what's effectively an archaeological map of the fort.
It's stunning good.
You beaut. Well, we started to fill in the gaps on the aerial photograph. There we could see the main street and the roads going off to the side. Here we've got it in the geophysics and all the details of the barrack blocks. Now what we've got in this area here is a rather large, perhaps stone building.
Yeah. And why does that make John such a beaut?
Here we have the central range of buildings here, with the huge courtyard building, which is the Principia headquarters building, right in the middle.
Both Gordon and Tony are sure that this is the headquarters building. And it's possible that these white lines on the geophys indicate the only stone building in the entire fort.
But the important thing is you now know the layout.
Yeah, we can navigate our way around the fort now. We can name the streets. So that now is the Via Principalis. This is the Via Praetoria. We know exactly where we are now.
It would be a great relief for me to see a bit of stone, because so far all we've seen is shadows in the ground.
Well, you're going to see it soon in that small trench across the wall there.
Well, I started the day wondering if there really was a fort here, and geophys have proved it to me in the most spectacular way. This trench should reveal the stone remains of a 2nd century Roman headquarters building.
That looks pretty encouraging. Turn it into a building now.
So once again, the digger makes its way over to hunt for the elusive wall, while I'm off to the incident room on a little ghost-busting trail. Yesterday, you teased me with the promise of the story of exorcism, and you still haven't told it to me.
Well, in the early 17th century, the house was owned by relatives of Francis Drake, the great Francis Drake, who'd fought the Spanish Armada. And the lady of the house, Joan Drake, suddenly woke up one night and shrieked and screamed and said that she was possessed by a devil. So her husband sends for an exorcist, and he comes to the house. And in fact, he climbs the stairs, and Joan Drake is in the dining chamber, which is on the 1st floor, and she sees him coming, so she races upstairs to her bedroom and bolts the door. So her husband chases after her with a great iron fork in his hand and beats on the door. Well, what happens next is that, in fact, they send for more exorcists. They're up in the chamber above Joan Drake's bedchamber, and they pray and they fast. And as far as I can tell from the documents, about 8 years later, Joan Drake is finally reconciled to Christ.
Well, it's a lovely story and a happy ending, but does it help us at all?
Well, I think it does, because in fact what it shows is that if the dining chamber, which we know has to be on the 1st floor because that's how things were then, so if Joan Drake's chamber, her bedchamber, was on the floor above, and these 3 Puritan exorcists are on the floor above that, it has to be a 4-storey lodging.
Do we know what she was doing with the devil?
Well, she said that she committed the unpardonable sin.
This is a family show, but have we any idea what that might mean?
Well, it could involve, the idea that she'd had carnal congress with the devil.
Good Lord. Back at the tower, Phil's found more walls than he can, well, shake a brick at.
Look, there's a face of stone that runs along there. You've got a big block of stone in there, block of stone in there. There's all the way along there, that comes in there. I mean, I was wondering whether this isn't the earliest wall we got on the site. It's just complicated, very, very complicated.
While Phil struggles with too many walls and Matt struggles to find one, Jonathan's taken me to nearby Hampton Court. Just over 3 miles away, Hampton Court was built by one-time Esher resident Cardinal Wolsey, and Jonathan wants to show me just how much it owes to Wainfleet. What's the date of this place?
January 1515 is when Wolsey's carpenters and masons turned up and the materials poured in for Hampton Court. But at that time, when it was a building site, he lived on Wainfleet's manor at Esher.
Really?
Oh, Wainfleet's old house, anyway.
So every morning when he came in, he'd got that image of Esher in his mind?
Absolutely he did.
You can certainly see Wainfleet's influence in these diamond patterns and in the look of the brickwork.
You can, Tony, but look carefully at them and see the way in which they don't really line up. They're all over the place. Now, Wainfleet's masons set that diaper work perfectly.
Yeah.
It's very organised on the facade. It's tightly built.
It's a kind of relief to know that even Cardinal Wolsey had problems with his build, isn't it? It's a huge contrast to Wainfleet's crisp diamond patterns picked out in a black glaze. No cowboys on this job. But no one really knows how this effect was achieved. Back at Wickhammon, geophys are ready to reveal the first ever picture of this village's long-lost church.
I mean, it's not a clear footprint of a church.
Oh, yeah.
But I mean, there's definitely a building here.
And it looks to me as if there's lots of rubble over there.
Yes.
I mean, do you think you can find the division between the nave and the chancel?
Yeah.
Hang on, that's... which bit's what?
The chancel's the eastern bit with the altar in.
Yeah.
And then there's usually an arch, and then there's a bigger bit, the nave, for the congregation.
Yeah.
But since churches tend to alter around that chancel arch, it's a good place to try and locate.
Well, that's where we want to go.
Well, it looks to me as if you might have the sort of chancel coming out here and the rest of it back there. So, yeah, if you can drop us on that.
The earliest documentary reference for this church is in 1218, but we've no clue to when it was actually built. Hopefully this trench will tell us that, and most importantly, if it was built on the site of an earlier Saxon church. A church was an essential part of any medieval or Saxon manor. Richard, if I was a lord of the manor here in the Middle Ages, how would I have gone about getting a church built? Would I have to ask anybody?
You just ask permission from the bishop just to get, you know, a permission to actually have a place of worship. But then after that, you can do what you like.
And how would I have gone about getting a design together?
Depends how much money you've got. If you've got lots of money, you can get the best masons in the country. They could build you a church, no matter what size it is, to the latest styles. If you're just using a local chap, then he would just use the local design of church, and that could be quite conservative in design.
In Wickdeave, the church and manor house still exist today, although both were completely rebuilt in the 17th century. What we're looking for in Warren Field is evidence of where the earliest villagers lived. And Phil's keeping his eyes peeled for even the smallest bit of evidence.
Oh, Helen.
You got something? Oh, wow. I can't believe you spotted that.
Oh, that's better. Look at that. Like a little pin, isn't it?
It's absolutely minute, or a lace end. Oh, yes.
Look at that.
Isn't that
Is
beautiful?
that well spotted, Phil?
Well done. That's amazing. It is. It's a lace end. You know, like just like that on my shoelace. Yes, but it's going. You can date these.
Are you really an expert on absolute rubbish? I mean, how would you possibly know about dating lace ends? Nobody could know that.
Well, you have to do everything in my line of work.
And there are plenty of other metal finds that have survived surprisingly well.
There's a few nice ones. 17th century royal farthing token, 18th century halfpenny from Ireland, but this one's the best. That is a medieval buckle, probably 13th, 14th century, and look how it shines.
It really does.
This is a key part of the Bronze Age ceremonial landscape, but I'm still not entirely convinced of the idea of a processional way. I need Francis to demonstrate it to me. Why have you put in this little muddy square?
Well, you see that there, Tony?
Yeah.
That's a stone, right? We wanted to see if there was another one matching it. So we scooped off the mud with this, and you see, that's hard, and that is very soft. And that's going down. So that there is where they pulled the stone that was originally matching that one out when they built the reservoir.
Do you buy that, Raksha? Couldn't it just be a hole?
For once, I actually believe Francis for the first time, because you can actually see the stones corresponding all the way up there.
Yeah.
And it's absolutely slap bang in line with that stone and the next one and the following one.
So are we going to say that that's proved?
Oh, without a shadow of doubt, Tony. I am actually quite excited.
But what does it mean? I mean, we've got no pots with paintings of people processing in a serious way up to a hill in the Stone Age. They weren't doing that kind of thing.
OK, well, there are records of tribal societies where you have this sort of thing taking place, often with posts rather than stones. And I want to convince you, and the way to convince you, I think, because you're a profound sceptic, is to walk along it, and we're going to think Neolithic thoughts. We're going to try to put ourselves back, OK? So suddenly now we're actually on the sand ridge.
Yeah.
OK? And it's getting firmer.
Yeah.
Oh, we've done it.
Well, I'm not sure what that's proved about the Stone Age, but it has proved we've got really good Wellington boots.
It's good, isn't it?
In spite of myself, I'm beginning to believe Francis's view that it was a ceremonial landscape. But there's still one big part that hasn't been confirmed: the stone circle. If it is prehistoric, it'll be a first for Time Team, a good enough reason to celebrate. And another thing I haven't told you is that it's our 200th dig. So what better way to end the day than with some bubbling?
Death to our enemy!
Who would have thought all these years we'd still be doing it?
I didn't think we'd even get going to start with.
Well, this is turning into a really exciting dig. We've got our Neolithic walkway along here. We've got our Mesolithic mound there. But over there, have we or have we not got a stone circle? Because if we have, it could prove to be the key to the whole site. We'll find out tomorrow.
You know, Tony, we've been talking about the Irish connection with this area, and maybe that was what impelled them to build the Crannog, a traditional Irish artificial island. There is another connection which we haven't mentioned so far, and that is, in this immediate area, 6 stones inscribed in an Irish script called Ogham have turned up. And this is peculiar to South Wales. There's the odd one in England, but generally speaking, this is the area where it's concentrated.
And this is Ogham?
This is Ogham. It's usually carved around the corner or the edge of a stone and is written upwards.
How do you mean carved around the corner of a stone?
Right, so you'd have notches on one side of the stone, or on the other side of the stone, or actually crossing over the corner.
Right.
And that would give you enough permutations and combinations with no more than 5 strokes or notches to each letter to get the 20-odd letters involved in the Ogham alphabet. And I wrote along this vertical line that they called the Druim the word Crannog, read from the bottom upwards with the letter C, R, A, a single stroke right across the line, N, 5 strokes on one side of the line repeated, O, G.
So what sort of thing did they write around here?
Well, for instance, I found one in this textbook which commemorates the daughter of Cwnignos. And the stone actually, in Ogham, reads, the stone of the daughter of Cwnignos Avitoriga. And this is Ogham in action, in both the Latin and in Ogham's script.
So you could translate from one to another.
That's right.
Yeah. When we were first invited here by Hilda and Bev to investigate this site, I don't think any of us could have predicted just what this dig would unearth. But it looks like one of the trenches in the woods may be about to give Mick another thing to tick off his potential monastery list. Over here, we've got what Hilda and Bev originally thought was maybe a shieling, a sheep pen, something like that, although Stuart thought that it might be a bit more complex than that. How are you doing, Raksha?
Well, if you came here this morning, it looked like a big jumble of stones, but we now have something a lot more substantial. We have these absolutely great big socking double skin walls coming through, which doesn't really go with a shieling.
So it's not a shieling or a sheep pen or whatever, because there's too much of it.
There's too much of it. It looks rather complex. It's just very strange because it kind of comes round through there, and then we have this other thing coming through just through here, which we think is a cell.
A cell? That sounds monastic, doesn't it? This twin-celled building may not be the final piece of the jigsaw, but it really does look like the sort of simple dwelling used by monks on early monastery sites across the Western Isles. And they all have one thing in common: the influence of the late 6th century monk, Columba. You do realise I've been pinching your book systematically for the last 3 days?
I notice you with your nose deep in a book on Celtic Christianity or something.
That's the kind of guy I am.
Yeah.
What struck me most was that Columba, who lived, what, 1,500 years ago, if not more, you'd have thought he would be lost in the mists of time, but a real strong character comes across.
Yeah, and we only get that because with some of these saints, somebody fairly soon after they died wrote what's called a life. And in this case, it's a chap called Adomnan, who was the later abbot of Iona. And he clearly spoke to people who knew Columba. So then he puts this life story together. And it's fantastic, the stuff in it.
He was a child prodigy.
Yep.
All the other monks where he was training doted on him. He had a really good education.
Yep.
He was very tall. He had a very loud voice, which I would have thought would have been very irritating.
I think that'd be very useful dealing with a load of monks on different islands.
And the thing that strikes me so much about Columba is that although, in a sense, he was living this really freezing cold existence in his monk's cell, he was also using his status to go all round Scotland, sorting out problems, getting the whole area unified.
Yeah, we know from the life that he went to various islands, he set up other monasteries on those islands. We know the names of some of them. We suspect there are others we don't know the names of. It's very difficult to locate a lot of them.
But if there was a monastery here, surely we would know about it. Surely it would be in the monks' annals.
Not necessarily. We know that Iona House, probably on Mull, in the later Middle Ages, had a whole series of properties down the north and west side of the island. But whether they were there earlier on, if they are, they're not mentioned. And that's your problem, you see. It's nothing like as easy as down in England.
So let's hope it's third time lucky, as we're opening yet another trench in the field to see if we can find any evidence of a settlement up here. Alex thinks that the earthworks here absolutely shout buried walls of houses. Like I haven't heard that one before. But as we continue our struggle to find any hint of a village at this end, a mile away down in the Bitterley we do know exists, it's a hive of activity as the village's own archaeological agitator, June, rallies the troops for another day's onslaught.
There's your muscle power, Karen.
Across the whole village, we've now got 19 test pits open. And as the finds come in, Debbie, our pottery expert, is plotting the results on a map of Bitterley. It's a crucial task because we're not so much interested in each individual find as the spread of finds as a whole, using different coloured dots for each historical period found in the test pits. This should help us build up a picture of when and how the present village took shape.
So these 3 trays are from test pit 12, behind the school, and you can see there's quite a mix of modern and older pottery. This is nice. That's 17th or 18th, that fits with the blue dot. That's really nice. That's a piece of what's called press-moulded slipware. It's not wheel thrown, it's formed over a curved former. When it's dried a little, they've pulled it off the mould, put the glaze on, and they would have decorated the edge with a cockle shell to give a pie crust effect. That's a really nice piece, that.
So, mid-morning day 2, and the villagers are gradually beginning to push back the date of their village. At the moment, they're having more success than we are. Back in the fields, we've now got 3 trenches open. We're finding walls and pottery, but as for evidence of a settlement, there seems to be absolutely nothing up here at all. Well, apart from the one rather large thing that's been staring us in the face, the big house, Bitterley Court. And if anyone round here is going to know the lie of the land, it's the local landowner. There's no bell or anything, is there?
Well, just get round here, look.
Are you sure about this?
Yeah, well, we'll play the mad archaeologist card if he's stroppy about it.
We might find a shotgun coming out of the bushes.
No. I got done for trespassing recently, and you can usually talk people round and they know what you're doing.
James, I hope you don't mind us breaking into your garden.
Hello. Hi.
Hi there.
Hi.
Do you think if you'd been standing here a few hundred years ago and you'd have seen the village here, you'd have thought, let's get rid of that and look at the view?
I don't suppose you'd be allowed to today, but if
It's been very typical in the past to move the village from away from the view. It happened thousands of times.
Yeah.
OK, so there's the village. What about the house? What do we know about that?
Gosh, well, it was built largely in the 17th century, but I'm hoping we'll find that there was a much older structure in the centre of it.
Does that make sense to you?
It does, yeah. I mean, we know that the church is Norman and so close to the big house suggests that there's something here of that date. But, I mean, ideally, it'd be nice to do some geophysics around it and to actually go and look at the structure of the building. I think that would be the first thing we would like to do.
That'd be good.
You wouldn't mind the house being turned over to our team?
Well, within limits, yes.
We'll discuss those limits later. Well, maybe it's best to leave the house for a moment and break him in with a little gentle geophysing. I just hope James is as carefree about his lawn as the rest of Bitterley's residents. And their efforts are producing some rather unexpected results on the finds map.
At first glance at that, I thought it does look like pottery. It's very, very fragile and damaged, so that might be a piece of medieval pottery. What colour have you chosen for medieval?
Medieval is yellow.
I've put a yellow dot down there at number 2.
So, Deb, in terms of my key yellow dots, I've got a definite one here and 2 questionable ones here.
Yeah.
I thought that the theory was that nothing was going on here in the village itself in medieval times. It was all happening in the field by Bitterley Court.
As you know, some of these trenches have started today and we haven't seen the finds processed yet, so it's going to be quite exciting to see how it develops.
Well, I'd love to know how it's all going to turn out, because like Mary Ann, I thought that medieval Bitterley was situated up in those fields, and for some reason it died out and the village moved down here to its present location. But now we've got medieval pottery down here and up there, one big medieval village. Beginning of day 3 here in Ebbs Nook in Northumbria, and we've got a major problem. As you can see, there's a skeleton there slap bang in the middle of the path without a head. Over here in this trench we've got a jumble of bones plus a skeleton with its head. In this trench here we've got the skeletons of 3 little babies. 4 little babies, thank you Cassie. As you see, things are changing all the time. In this trench there's a jumble of bones. Down here we've got a stone burial box and another jumble of bones, and the problem is all these bones understandably take a long time to deal with, which means we can't get down to the archaeology and answer the questions we came here to answer, which are how old is this site and can we link it to its patron saint St Ebb? And the debate has been going on long and hard all through the evening. As you can see, there's a few bleary eyes here today, in particular this pair of bleary eyes.
I'm not good in the morning, you know that.
I know, but what are we going to do about these trenches? We can't dig everything, can we?
No, well, we certainly can't deal with all the burials in every trench. And I think we're agreed we don't need any more trenches.
Absolutely.
We've got a lot of work on.
But you disagree about which trenches to leave and which trenches to dig?
The difficulty is deciding which ones will give us the earlier material or the earlier burials that we can get dates from.
You are gambling on getting down to find skeletons which we might not actually get.
You do realise that between the two of you, you've argued for every single trench except Trench 5, the one with the little babies in it, which is the one that I want to excavate. Don't laugh at me, Joe Grundy. The reason is because Mick says that that could be where the earliest part of the site actually is.
You might have to swallow your pride and actually accept that because of the babies in there, we cannot resolve that trench.
They are so irritating. Without something to date, we're unable to prove the age of the chapel. As this is a religious site, we're unlikely to find much pottery, so our only option is to look for a burial, either under or next to one of the walls. Mary Ann is ready to start work on her Lindisfarne Gospel page. She's using similar materials and tools to those the monks worked with over 1,000 years ago. but she's only got one day to create her work of art.
Sue, this is really hard.
It is very detailed work, absolutely minute.
Is it likely that they would have worked outside?
I think it's quite possible. After all, the windows are very small, and if you've got a nice sheltered area, the light's brilliant when you're working outside.
We've got an extra piece of equipment on the promontory, and within minutes it pays dividends.
This has just come from the spoil that Alan's detecting on at the moment. It's a medieval silver coin. So you can see just about make out the portrait of the king. What I can make out is the words Rex Ang.
King of England, by
King
the sound of it.
Absolutely, yeah. And I've managed to date it so far between 1277 and 1379.
What do you think then, Jackie? Well, I think what you thought was just a skull is actually part of an articulated in situ individual here. So you've got the neck vertebra coming down here, and then across here we've got the shoulder. So I think we've got an undisturbed burial. This is the kind of staining you get from shroud pins. Now, the problem with shroud pins is that they have a very long life, so it's not very handy for dating. But there have been none found before the 12th century.
So another great find, but still nothing to link our site to the 7th or 8th century. And we're running out of time. It's the afternoon of day one, and we're working on the bottom of what's thankfully an empty reservoir in Devon. We've already put in 3 trenches on what are hopefully 3 different prehistoric monuments that we suspect date from the Bronze Age. Trench 1 is over what we think is a terminal burial cairn at the end of a single row of stones. We've put in Trench 2 on 2 piles of rocks that might be more burial cairns. And Trench 3 is over a double row of stones that we suspect was a processional way leading up to a mound, which Francis thinks is the central part of the whole site. It's possible that the mound was here for thousands of years before these monuments were even built, as we've got dating evidence from flint found on top. If we're right, and it is this vast prehistoric ceremonial landscape, what does it mean? What's it for?
Well, what it was for was the different things in people's lives that they want made formal and ceremonial. So these cairns would be when someone passes on to the next world. This double stone row could be a procession that marked when a new chief came to power, something like that. This stone circle was where people celebrated the changing of the seasons.
So it's like a combination of a church and a registry office?
And a town hall. Yes, it's all there. And the thing is, it all seems to fit together, Tony.
It's almost too good to be true, isn't it?
It is. And then I sort
of course, all these theories rely on the
then
dates of these monuments tying together.
Mound.
Well, I mean, I think it looks like these stones here from this cairn are later than these ones here.
Over in Trench 1, we've got major doubts about the terminal cairn being prehistoric, especially when you compare it with the single stone row.
Is the cairn earlier or later than the stone row?
And we should get it in that section.
Absolutely.
All right, fair enough.
And it's not looking any better in Trench 2 either, as we're uncovering evidence that the cairns aren't prehistoric at all.
We've removed the silt here. You can see this really fine, almost clay on top there. And that was the silt from the bottom of the reservoir. And it's sitting on top of this dark layer, which is the ground surface in 1860 when the reservoir was filled. And here's our cairn, and you can see that the stones of the cairn are sitting happily right on top of the 1860 ground surface.
And that means, Raksha?
Well, it means that it's not prehistoric, and we know that because it's literally just sat on top of that black surface. It's not cut into that, so there isn't a specific cut made for it.
Does this mean that all the piles of stones around the reservoir are likely to be from the 1860s?
Well, that one's 1860. This one here as well, it's in front of you, that's also clearly sitting on top of that old ground surface. The cairns that we have are coming in a line along the edge of the reservoir. They're all in a nice line. My bet is none of them are prehistoric.
I seem to remember not long ago saying that this all seemed too good to be true. Scarily, I was right. Since we've proved that the cairns aren't prehistoric, what on earth does that mean for the rest of the site? Could the Double Stone Row be the next to go?
Row, Tracy. That hole, what, was a stone in there once?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really nice, Robert. It's been pulled out, presumably when the reservoir has been done.
Yeah, it looks about that level. So then over here, we've got another stone, the one that matched that. Oh, yes. I mean, I think we've got the hole, haven't we, for the stone?
It looks like it. I mean, you can see that small rock standing down there.
That's the classic wedging for a stone in a stone row. And the other thing, of course, we got this stony stuff at the top here. Do you think that could be the remains of a sort of walkway?
It's degraded down and it's covering the surface. So this must have been the point at which this was open to walk up and down on, I would have thought.
I think that's brilliant. OK, I'm convinced, especially with that little packing stone there, that this is a prehistoric double stone row.
Yeah.
I mean, little doubt about it.
So Francis is very happy with his double stone row. But other parts of the site have got us scratching our heads.
Could have easily been set up, which could have fallen over.
We've got another massive monument to investigate, and Helen and Stuart are getting their heads round it, the Stone Circle.
They're looking much more into the centre, aren't they?
That's right, yeah.
Now, this is the one that's vastly off the line.
There is actually a chance that this big feature was a cattle enclosure, or a horse paddock, or something else. But because these banks and potential post holes are so crisscrossed by later ploughing, it'll have to remain an enigma. Dan, I've got some bad news for you.
OK, break it to me gently then.
It also means I need to have a chat with Diane. There is nothing that ties in with this house at all in this field.
Right, OK, so where do we go from here then?
I don't know, how do you feel about that?
It's difficult because it creates more questions than it answers, really. You know, I can't imagine that this field, this area, they just suddenly put a house here in the 1530s. You know, there's got to be something that went before it. You know, it's such a perfect location. It's near sort of the Roman road, it's near the river, it's near the ford. You can't imagine that people haven't used it for living on sort of since time began almost.
If we want to find evidence of an earlier house, or the first version of that house, then we've got to move in that direction.
That's fine.
Moving in that direction means moving into your lovely garden. Moving into your lovely garden means ripping it up, at least bits of it.
That's fine. We'll just dig holes in the lawn and see what happens.
So a lot of our effort is now shifting to the area immediately around the standing Tudor manor house, as we try to find any previous buildings that may have stood on this site. The test pits are so close to the house because geophys have already eliminated an area further to the south that Stuart thought may contain a hendra, an early Welsh settlement. But undeterred, Stuart has another target, as he believes there should be some sort of structure on the original road into the site.
We need to get across to as close as that wall as possible, so looking at some sort of L shape.
Well, what we're looking for over here, find our level, and then we can chase it back. It'll be a funny shaped trench.
Yeah. It's a funny shaped area. We've got to have a funny shaped trench, isn't it?
A mix.
We're putting in a couple of trenches here because we'd expect an earlier manor to have a defensive wall and a gatehouse, because during medieval times, this was the wild Welsh West. Constant feuds and lawlessness meant even the most powerful families needed to defend themselves.
It's funny that on that door there are no defences at all, even though that's the first door you come to.
But the second door, pull that across.
Certainly the current manor house is a monument to the art of survival.
Right.
And that. And same thing.
Another drawbar. But we're on the first floor.
Now that doorway there goes through to the Lord's private quarters, and that's defended in the same way.
So the Pritchards could barricade themselves in there if all else failed?
Well, if all else really fails, they can go down this little escape stair here, down to another part of the house. You'll see that this is a house of power and paranoia.
There's no such paranoia over in the moat field, more a profound sense of relief and jubilation, because we've just made a remarkably rare discovery.
Isn't that wonderful? That looks very prehistoric, and it looks like it's tending more towards the Bronze Age than Iron Age. But let's have the...
I was going to say, let's have the local knowledge.
It's got to be Bronze Age, isn't it? Bronze Age, yeah.
That is stunning.
That's really something. I've never dug a piece of Bronze Age pot up in my life, and I've been digging over 50 years.
You've never, ever dug a piece of...
pieces in museums, but no, never seen any.
This pot suggests that people may have been living here during the Bronze Age. And when you consider the whole population of the UK 4,000 years ago was only about 200,000, it's like finding a needle in a haystack.
But I mean, this would be an ideal place for a little Bronze Age settlement down by the stream. Lovely place.
Yeah.
I think we're, it's just superb. Let's find...
Within minutes, a new find emerges.
Stone tile. It's got that reddish kind of purpley look, isn't it?
It's got a point to it.
Yeah, I think it's worth
That could be a roof tile.
worth asking, because if it is a roof tile, isn't that the first one? Yeah.
When the Romans arrived, southwest Britain was divided up into tribes such as the Dobunni. While there were Brits who were hostile to Roman imperial expansion, others, particularly those who were already trading with Rome, were more welcoming and more likely to build a Romanised building. You've got this Iron Age landscape, and suddenly plonked into the middle of it, you get this super modern villa. How did they know what to build? Where did they get the ideas and the craftsmen from?
Well, you've got a lot of things happening very close to here. Go 10 miles to the north and you've got the Roman town of Bath. Now, this is somewhere where huge investment is taking place in the 60s and 70s. There are probably masons coming across from Gaul, probably Roman engineers, building this massive monumental temple and everything that goes with it.
And I think what John says is correct, but I think you've also got to accept that there are people here in the late Iron Age who are probably already important, already perhaps high status. And what they're doing, and that's before the conquest, and after the conquest, what they do is develop a Roman villa, perhaps referring to sites in southeastern England, to show off their allegiance to the new authority, perhaps, and their links to the southeast of England and their knowledge of building structures.
So what would the people around here have felt who couldn't afford this lovely, swanky new Roman villa?
I think intimidated to start with. It's like thinking about medieval cathedrals, sort of peasant going and suddenly seeing this huge spiring tower. They'd be in awe of it. And that's what they feel when they go to see Bath. OK, a small little villa like this is not quite the same, but it's very alien architecture.
Yeah, most people in the region at the time are still living in round houses, so somebody who builds a villa like this is showing off their links to the new political authority.
Or it could be seen as a huge faux pas, like someone putting up stone cladding on their building.
I'll go with that. As well as villas, the Romans introduced another alien feature to our landscape. Yes, the Romans brought the garden to Britain. Gardens were standard parts of villa life, so we're going to create our very own hortus under the watchful eye of Hilary and Monica. And we're keeping a close eye on authenticity. Do we actually know what plants and flowers the Romans used?
We've got a pretty good idea because various plant remains have been found, particularly in a herb shop in Colchester, and they've been analysed, so we know they had things like dill and chervil and various other things, so we're going to try and select plants which fit in with that evidence.
Why don't we ever dig up anything like that? What have you got your eyes on, Claire?
We're going to go for this urn here. It's a nice simple shape, and we've got the acanthus leaves at the base, which would be just right for our garden.
I'll tell you what, we could stick this on top of Bridget's well.
I don't think she'd be very happy about that.
Yeah, you just never get...
Morning.
Morning,
Tony. It's not so romantic up here now, is it?
Yeah, well, we're getting some good stuff. Got that bit of flint, Phil?
Yeah, we have.
You know, we had some flints yesterday
Yeah.
up here, and David was pretty cautious because they get flint all the time. Well then,
Don't
Phil.
let it blow away, Tony.
What is it?
Well, it's what we call a microlith. I mean, it's a very small piece of flint, but it's been deliberately shaped. And the important thing is that it is a very diagnostic piece of flint.
What does that mean?
Well, it means that they can be tied down to hunters who were probably the first people who were living in Scotland, maybe, what, 6,000 to 8,000 years ago.
Well, how do you know that this is man-made? Because it looks to me just like something I'd dig up out the garden.
Well, can you see that along this edge here, some very, very minute, microscopic almost chips along the edge?
Yeah.
Can you see that?
Yeah.
Been removed from there, and in fact we got the same thing on this side as well. Little tiny chips along that edge. Now that is not the sort of thing that would happen accidentally.
What would they use that for then, Phil?
Well, these things are used basically collectively. We use quite a lot of them in a tool, we call them composite tools.
Yeah.
And they've always been accepted as being arrowhead tips and things like that, barbs. But now, I mean, people are increasingly becoming aware that they're used for drills, engraving tools, scraping tools. I mean, you name it, you virtually use them for anything.
So what sort of people were these?
Well, they're basically hunters. And let's be honest, what a better place to observe your game than up here? I mean, you've got a full view of everything. Like, you can have a look out at the lake and animals coming down and what have you. Superb catchment area.
So are we really starting to say that this is a prehistoric site, or is it too early yet?
I personally think we're probably a bit early. That one flint doesn't make a summer, you know.
But at the same time, flints that are up here, they haven't migrated here. The flint is likely to have started up here. It hasn't moved down. We're right up on top of a hill.
King Alfred the Great is on the run from the Vikings, right? And he dives into this vast network of salty marshes that completely covered this area during the 9th century. And he sees this little mud hut that belongs to a swineherd and his wife, and he tells them that he's a deserter from the English army, and they agree to hide him. And the swineherd goes off and gets on with his jobs. She goes off and does her chores. And Alfred's sitting there, completely wrapped in thought, and he doesn't notice this huge black cloud pouring out of the fire, and the swineherd's wife comes back in, and she is absolutely livid. "You couldn't be bothered to keep an eye on my cakes, could you?" she says. "But you wouldn't mind shoveling them down your throat when they were baked, would you, you greedy fat lummox?" So what does Alfred do? Does he storm off in some kingly huff? No, Alfred the Great is a man of the people. He's like some 9th century Che Guevara figure. He just apologises profusely, and in some royal way that I've never quite understood, he uses the whole experience as a kind of learning curve that enables him to gather all his people together and lead them in another charge against the Vikings.
Hello, are you Mr. Morgan?
That's right.
Hello, my name's Mick Aston from the Time team.
How do you do?
This is Phil Harding.
How do you do?
So, Robbie, what's the significance of this place, apart from the fact that Alfred hid in a few square miles of bog? What does it tell us?
Well, really, I suppose it is that was the kingdom of the West Saxons, or even the kingdom of the Saxon English. At one point, in the time that we're discussing this weekend, in 878, Alfred's kingdom had shrunk to the few acres that surround Athelney. The particular reason why we know so much about Alfred is from the fact that a chap called Asser, who was a Welsh friend of his and became one of his bishops, wrote a very detailed life about him. It's the only life of a Saxon king that we have of that kind. At the time that we're talking about, he was just coming up to 30. He was the 4th son of his father, and in fact the 4th son to be king. I don't suppose he ever expected to be king in his early years, with 3 elder brothers between him and the throne, but he had a horrendous situation to face, because the Danes had literally split England in 2. They'd cruelly slaughtered most of the kings of places like Northumbria and East Anglia, and were obviously intent on taking the rest of England for themselves. But I think he wanted to get where people who didn't know the exact lie of the land wouldn't find him. He didn't, by all accounts, have very many followers with him, and so he ended up at the Isle of Athelney.
So who are the people who are attacking him?
Guthrum, king of the Danes, who is pursuing him, trying to find out where he is, and wreak one of those peculiarly nasty vengeances which the Vikings had up their sleeves. They practiced what was known as the blood eagle, which was a peculiarly nasty form of death in which they kind of slit the victim down the front while living, peeled back the ribs, and then flung back on either side the lungs to form a living blood eagle.
It's so disgusting.
It is absolutely revolting. And if that wasn't enough, you know, they went in for a tidy bit of crucifixion, by the way. You are talking about rather brutal, ruthless men.
Now, I've always assumed that part of this was simply black propaganda put about by the Anglo-Saxons because they were on the losing end. The Vikings really were as barbaric as they were painted.
Yeah, I mean, this was really a sacrifice to their gods. This was the way they sacrificed to Odin, basically. And so it was part of their ritual, if you like, part of their religion.
This is what it must have been like for Alfred. I can't even move, let alone run away from any Vikings. So, what happened to him? Was he split down the middle and had all his guts scooped out until his lungs were flapping around by his ears? No, of course not. We may have to take Asser's biography with a pinch or two of salt, but basically his character analysis of Alfred seems to have been about right. People trusted him, they liked him, they believed he was working in their interests, and so they followed him. And miraculously, within a year of his terrible defeat, he'd got all the people round here together and they'd marched out and they defeated the Vikings at the Battle of Edington. And that's when this weird double act started. As soon as the battle was over, saintly Alfred converted horrible Guthrum to Christianity, and immediately they started going on this strange procession all round the Somerset lowlands, all round the places where Alfred had been hiding just a few months previously, with Guthrum all dressed in white to symbolise his conversion to Christianity. It's very odd. Although actually I feel a bit like Alfred and Guthrum at the moment. It's Saturday morning. I've been wandering around this smelly marsh for the last 24 hours trying to get this story together, and I've got absolutely no idea what the archaeologists have been doing at all. I think if it's all right with you lot, I'll climb out of here and get back to the real world. Join Time Team on Patreon to access exclusive 3D models, masterclasses and behind-the-scenes insights.